Hi there, welcome back to Bold Buggers. I'm Steve. Today is part 2 of the popcorn whiskey series of where we're going to put our first generation of our Uncle Jesse's popcorn whiskey version through the still. Just before I go ahead though, I'd like to give a big thanks and shout out to all the guys that have subscribed and liked my videos. Really appreciate the effort. If you haven't subscribed, hit the link down below and let me know what you think about the videos. Alright, so today we're going to put this through the still. It's been 2 weeks of fermenting, maybe just over 2 weeks. I was sitting slightly over 1 on the hydrometer, and an extra couple of days it went down to just below 1, so I'm at about 0.96, 0.97 on the hydrometer, which is good. I'm happy with that. As you can see with the airlock, there's no movement in there whatsoever. And with the taste of what's left, give it a bit of a... that's actually quite a tasty beer, but no sweetness there left at all, so I know there's no sugar left. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to siphon out into another container. What I like to do is I just do old school. I don't have a siphoning gadget or pump. So what happens is there will be, most of the popcorn will settle down here where the yeast is. Because obviously now at the moment now the yeast is inactive, it's not doing anything because there's no sugars for it to move. So I just take a pipe, and what I do is I just hold my finger at that level on top of the popcorn, and then I hold the pipe about a centimeter and a half above that level. So I'm not sucking up the popcorn and the yeast and then distilling that. I'd rather keep the yeast back in there because I'm going to use it again. So I'll do that. What I do too though, with popcorn that's been germinated, sometimes you will have popcorn floating in suspension in the water, in the beer. So I will just put it through a sieve so that any popcorn that is sitting in suspension I can put back into the still and then reuse that again, into the bucket, sorry. So let me get started with that. I'm going to siphon off and then we can fill up the baby and get the fire going. Alright, looking forward to this. So this, as it stands at the moment, is not a sour mash because it's the first generation. It only becomes a sour mash once we've put the backset from here after this run back into this. Then it becomes a sour mash. So let's get cracking. Alrighty. Okay, so you can see slightly different setup than the other videos. I'm not going to run this one through the thumper. It's the first gen. I'm just basically going to do a spirit run. A spirit run means I'm not going to be too fussy on the cuts because being the first generation, it's not going to have the backset flavors building it. It's all starting off that sour mash in the future generations. So I'm not going to bother with the thumper. I'm just going to run the still as is straight through to the coil. Yeah, so slightly different look than what you used to from my previous videos. So filled up here. I've also added a bit of heads that I had from previous runs to it, from whiskey runs. I'm sitting at about this size. It's about 18 liters about 17 liters is sitting in my still at the moment, so I'm sitting at about this level here. I'm now going to fire it up. What I do too, I've mentioned this before, but just as a precaution, when I do light up my still, I'm going to put my pump on so that I can start running, not quite really cold water yet, it's just cool water because I haven't put any ice bottles into my chiller. I'm going to let water run here just in case it goes faster than expected. I'm not saying I'm preoccupied with something else, hopefully not, but just as a precaution, rather make sure that you're safe than sorry. So I always, just out of habit, I fire up my pump and get the water circulating. That way, when you do start to steam, you're not going to have vapor pouring out your spout. It'll be liquid, which is far less dangerous. So that's just my habit of doing things and the way I like to manage. All right, let's get this puppy fired up and let's go. All right, nice and cool. All right. Okay, so one thing I need for my still is some dough. Sorry, I'm out of breath, I've been carrying water. So this is what I like to call moonshiner cement. It's just plain flour. What I do like to do is, before I'm at temperature, get this made and then let it set, because it's almost like when you're making bread, you want to leave it to sit and prove for a bit, and while that's happening, then it becomes more tacky. If you stick it on as is, it's either going to be too runny or too hard, and then it won't stick to your still. So if you leave it like that for about an hour or so, or an hour, because this will take about an hour and a half to get going, leave it like that covered, and by the time you come back, you can paste up. Your still will start having decent temperature in it, without steam yet, so that you can seal up your joins, and then the dough will stick nicely because it'll be tacky. So just a little tip on the baking on the baking side of distilling. Alrighty, okay, let me clean up, and we should be ready to go. Okay, so my dough's been sitting for a bit, and you can see it's nice and tacky now, and that's what I want to see. So this will stick to the still now. So I'm going to go and dough up and seal my still while it's before it starts to steam. Okay, so put my dough on. What I'll do is, as this hardens up from the heat of the still, I'll just pack it up and just pat it down and make it a little bit more solid, and then I'll just keep keep what's left of the dough, keep that covered, and if any cracks appear, because as the starts to heat up, it'll start to condense. So little cracks can appear. Then all I do is I take what's left over of the dough, and I just keep patching that up as I go through my run. That'll stop alcohol from escaping and make sure that it's coming out of that end instead of this end. All right, so now we're just waiting for starting to get hot here. Not too hot, but this is starting to warm up, so we'll be running shortly. It's my heat starting to get warm here. It's, as you can see, I'm holding on, so it's not too hot, but it's starting to warm up this end. So probably another 15 minutes and I'll be ready to start focusing on my jars for collection. Okay, so temperature's coming on nicely. I've got heat now all the way down to this joint here. This pipe is still a little bit cooler from the cooling of the ice water now, which I've got frozen blocks in my cooler. So this is now starting to heat up. Once this gets hot, then it's literally 2 minutes and then we're coming out the spout. So this is nearly done, and then we'll start with my foreshots. So looking good. I'm not running it too hot, just a nice steady low temperature, and it's flowing nicely. That's really coming on well. Okay, so we are pretty much done with our foreshots. Okay, the reason again why we do the foreshots and we get rid of those afterwards, because that's got not only methanol in it, but it's got acetone, methanol, and aldehydes in it, which are obviously dangerous for us to drink. So we don't use that in what we're going to be batching for our drinkable whiskies or drinkable alcohol. So I'm pretty much done with that. Foreshots done, onto the heads. Okay, so run done. This is still nice and hot. I'm going to let that cool down just a little bit so I can pick it up. I don't want it to cool down too much because I want it to be able to just, when I pour it out of there, some of it out into my bucket, I want to be able to still dissolve my sugars. So I need the heat from that to dissolve the sugar. So on the run, we got 6 decent jars. The 7th jar went just under 40%. So I'm going to keep that as faints, and this is faints. Faints is a term that the guys use, and it's for, basically it's your heads and tails collection that you can use for future runs and future spirits. I like to keep it if I need to make gin and I need a clear spirit, so I'll use a gin and then I'll add my botanicals to that and then redistill it again. So I will put that with that collection. This I might add to that too, because I need the volume a bit low now, so I might just add this first gen to my faints collection bucket so that I can make a decent size batch of whiskey, a batch of gin, sorry, for one of my future videos. So that'll be coming up shortly. Alright, so with that done, it's time to get my sugar and start getting ready to mix that up to put it back into my fermenter for generation 2. Okay, so in our bucket where the corn is, popcorn still in, it's going to take about 17 litres. So I've got a 20 litre bucket here. What I want to do is I like to put in at least a third of my backset that's still nice and hot in here. Put that into this bucket. So I'll start off with that first. It's a little bit warm, but I can manage. It's cooled down a little bit. Okay. Right, so I got in about just over 5 litres in there. And then what I'm going to do is just jump now. That wasn't fun. So, when we started, we were putting in 20 litres of water into our first generation. This time we can't put 20 litres in because there's still a good 7 litres or 5 to 7 litres inside my bucket at the moment where the corn is. So now my recipe only needs 2.5 kilos. Alright, so with the heat from my backset, so what I'm doing now is this is going to be the start of generation 2, where it's going to now start taking the flavors of the cooked popcorn mash and start now making its own sour mash flavors inside during the fermenting process. Okay, that's doing nicely. Right, I'll let that sit for a bit, let that cool down. Then I'm going to top that up with water, and then once that's cooled down nicely, I can't stick this now inside my fermenting bucket. Otherwise, all I'm going to do is I'm going to kill the yeast. So I need this to cool down nicely. Still a little bit of sugar left in the bottom there. Easiest tip, you just bash your spoon down on the bottom. If it's crunchy, you know you still got sugar to dissolve. But it's nearly done. Alright, okay, I'm going to go ahead and add some water to this. And then put the lid on, let it cool down. And then we can add it to our popcorn bucket from the generation 1. And then now we can seriously start calling it the sour mash whiskey. Okay, get the water. Okay, so when I add water here, this is 20 litres, I'm only going to aim for about the 15 litre mark, because I don't want to dilute this too much. I'd rather let it cool down, let me fill my still up, and then I can top water up later in the still when everything's settled, or in the fermenting bucket. Alright, so some cold water goes in. That should do. Alright. Don't forget to make sure your buckets are nice and clean. Hygiene is very important, especially when you're busy fermenting, otherwise stuff spreads. Alright, but that's looking good. Not too hot anymore. So that should be good, and it actually tastes quite nice now. Okay, it's sweet, but it's already got a nice flavour to it. So just let that cool down, then we bang it into the bucket. Put the lid on and let the yeast do the rest. This is now when it starts to really start tasting like a whiskey. Alright, let's check the temperature. Okay, we down to about 31 degrees, and I'm happy with that. So what we'll do is we're going to put this into the fermenting bucket now, and then top it up with water, seal it up. We'll probably take a little reading of for the hydrometer too. This recipe, now the nice thing is, so I'm reusing the popcorn I did and the yeast from the first generation. I'll be able to get, out of that popcorn and that yeast, I'll be able to get 8 generations out of the same popcorn. So it's not a case of me having to make a new batch of like oat porridge, like that, like other whiskies are made. So it's quite cost effective, you're not having, and a lot less effort. Doesn't take much at all to do, and I enjoy it too. So having said that, let me get this into the fermenter and we can start getting ready to seal it up and let it start bubbling away again, so we can get on to getting generation 2 distilled. Okay, so we are all mashed up. This is now actually the next day. The fermenter is fermenting away here. So this will probably take about 2 weeks. And then we'll be able to start with distilling generation 2. So this now is a sour mash because we've started with the backset process. Alright, so I'm going to put this back in my garage, let it continue bubbling away, and then we will be back in 2 weeks for the distilling of it and some tasting, because it'll start to take on a much more complex flavor than what the first generation was. Okay, so thanks again for everyone for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget, like and subscribe, and share with your friends. Got any questions? Drop me a comment down below. Thanks guys, thanks for watching. See you next week. Cheers.